actually I would need more or less 15 seconds, meaning telling you that sustainable construction for construction products is to be handled through the CPR. So this is very, very clear. Everybody lifted your hands with the CPR thing, so everybody knows it. So actually I could go home, gather these things. Seriously, I was asked to brief you a little, because everybody knows CPR, at least the 3 letters, but the knowledge on what it contains might then degrade a little when it comes to the details. And therefore, this is again kind of a short crash course on what is the bearing, where are we now located, and what are the systems and tools already existent, for the reason of avoiding yet again a discussion, do we need yet another regulation there somewhere? We do not need something which already exists in the CPR. I'll start with the first slide and the nice title, Sustainable Construction. I'm so happy that I can refer to the same concept here twice, because I happen to be the head of the sector dealing with sustainable construction, which is here. So therefore this is a double joy for me. And indeed, we are in charge of the CPR as well. Let's see, how do we go forward with this? Yeah, I think I found the correct one. And now we have an empty slide, but don't worry, it will continue to fill in. So, CPR, as already mentioned, is there. It is adopted, it is fully applicable. And what does it mean? Aha, now I missed everything. Let's try again. It is a regulation, and according to the treaties, the European treaties, that means that it is directly applicable. Why do these go away? Should somebody do something about this? And direct applicability means that every single one of you can directly turn to its wording and its content, without having to look for national transposition, without having to look for some guidance documents, without having to look for this or that. And it serves your purposes in all your practical contexts. And this is good to be remembered, because very often people forget that, okay, the law already is there. What it contains can be briefly summed up as common technical language. We tried to put this wording also in the regulation itself. We were told that this is misleading when we talk about language here, and there are languages of member states, and you know. So we managed to put it and keep it in the explanatory memorandum. But anyhow, this means amongst other things perhaps, but this means the content of our harmonized technical specifications, HTS, and as you should know, there are 2 types of them. There are harmonized standards, hence, and then there are European assessment documents. For standards, you should also know that, for example, the mentioned EN 15804 is not a harmonized standard, it is a supporting standard. And then you should know about the mechanism how harmonized standards are kind of filled in or supplemented by these supporting standards by references to them. So I'm concentrating on the standard part here, not so much on the other. And this common technical language, of course, should also be used. What is this now doing? This is now doing nothing. Okay, now. It is to be used by member states when regulating. So, when member states are setting requirements for the performance of construction products, they should go for this harmonized system, this common technical language. And also, of course, when manufacturers present information about the performance of their products. Manufacturers make a declaration of performance in this new system, which you should know about by now. And then when the declaration of performance is drawn up, the products have to be CE marked as well. CE marking is kind of an accessory, it's a wonderful thing and we can make all sorts of noise of it, but the main point is here the declaration of performance. And this should be remembered later on when we look at the context of how to go forward with this method. When applying the CPR. Okay, then I have a graphic thing which some of you have seen about internal market, and I think it's still worth repeating here. Internal market consists of manufacturers and others, importers, supplying the goods to their users, architects, engineers, constructors who form the demand. So this is the internal market. And what we do need to make it function better is a regulatory and administrative framework of rules. This framework is not the internal market. And it should not come von oben herab there on top of this internal market, kind of constraining and restricting it. It should be supporting the whole market. It should be empowering its actors. It should be liberating them to act more efficiently. And therefore, I have put this idea here below. So something which is enabling and supporting, as I mentioned. Then at some point I was asked to add here distributors, so they are still there. But many of you are not distributors, so I can pass them very quickly here. Basic works requirements. This was something that also was clarified in the CPR. Previously we talked about essential requirements, which was a great source of problems because this was totally different from essential requirements in a new approach. And basic work requirements, quite like essential requirements before, relate to works, as it is said, basic requirements for construction works. And this is why we have to read very carefully what is said in the Annex 1 of the CPR, to the CPR, and actually read beyond the words also, because the words, unfortunately, are formulated in a fashion which would give a wrong impression on what was meant with it. Annex 1 to the CPR does not oblige anybody to anything. It gives kind of a smorgasbord for the member states. So this is in general for them. This is the area where the CPR operates. And these are the topics they should cover in their, or they are free to cover in their construction legislation then to be served by the CPR. Of course, this has a bearing also for the writers of harmonized technical specifications, meaning they have to look what to do within the realm of these basic works requirements for a given product family. And this is what now leads us later on to the basic work requirement 7. And when we are talking on scientific and general terms about parameters, some kind of indicators and so on, that is translated in the CPR terminology as essential characteristics. So the products have essential characteristics for their performance, in relation to their performance. And then we come to basic work requirement 7. As mentioned already before, here this was added in the CPR. It was felt necessary to have this kind of new aspect of sustainability and especially resource efficiency on board. We are still living on the 2010s now. It would be rather futile to assume that these kind of aspects didn't have a bearing for the commercialization, for the marketing of construction products, which is of course the main broad idea of the CPR. And then there are two operational targets which kind of can be formed out of this general outlook. One is, what is mentioned there is recycling and reuse of materials, and the other which comes into play is substituting materials of high concern, high environmental concern. And both these aspects are then relevant when we go further in the analysis. And what I'm here to present is not necessarily the merits of any particular system. I'm letting Mikkeli to come partly to this topic later on from the Commission point of view, but from the Commission point of view, when it comes to the application, the approach to this whole system, as I started with, the application for the Commission as a whole is then to be based on how we are looking at it in the CPR context. So the first idea here is that we have to focus on real-life barriers to trade. We have to look what are the requirements, what are the expectations. So we cannot start inventing something from a blue air and then hoping that, okay, somebody would have an interest on this one. And when this is mapped, this could well be that the results are somewhat different from product family or larger subsector to another. And this should also be taken into account when going forwards. The tool, as I mentioned, to use here, as with every other basic work requirement in the CPR, are the harmonized technical specifications, harmonized standards, or European assessment documents. And here I have made the distinction between the harmonized technical specification and then the supporting documentation, which then contains the methods. And the normal thing, the customary thing to use as a basis of these methods are, of course, standards, European standards. And this is then the inventory what we do start with. And this inventory has, of course, started already. The current ongoing phase is what could be called a reality check, meaning in SEN, in the product TCs, you know that in SEN you do have TC 350, which is dealing with these horizontal methods, but then you have product TCs, some 40 of them for different product families, and these product TCs are then the one dealing with harmonized product standards, hence. And so in the product TCs, there's ongoing currently this kind of a reality check. The last number I heard was 13 product TCs starting this already, but I do believe that this is a larger number by now. And the aim is to look to create these product category rules from this real life base suitable for industry for all these areas. And of course, the Commission is supporting this process. It merits to be said, perhaps, that this whole discussion has undergone for some time also in our high-level forum and in the thematic group 3 under it. And in this thematic group 3, this approach has again received full support from the participants and of course in the inter-service discussions within the whole Commission. The point here is that the reporting format has also to be thought about. And here I would come to some of the assertions already presented to you. Actually, we are not discussing from the starting point of environmental product declarations versus PEF or something like this. No, we will create now, meaning in the coming, I wouldn't say necessarily months, but in a shortish time. Manfred is smiling over there, but let's see what this shortish means. In a shortish time, we are developing the outlook on how this should look like in the DOP context, because the DOP context is the one to be used. And we are not in favor, at least at this stage, we are not in favor of a structure where within the DOP you would have something like a separate declaration, an environmental performance declaration. This doesn't fit well in the context. And this kind of structure is not used for any other basic work requirement either. So therefore, we have to integrate this matter better into the CPR frame. And this is what we are going to do. And I repeat, this is going to then imply and mean in practice that you as manufacturers will have amongst the essential characteristics which are listed in the harmonized product standard for you. You will have characteristics linked to Basic Work Requirement 7 as well as for the others. And then you will have the choice as manufacturers, as you always have apart from exceptional cases, to declare them or not. So again, CPR is part of these rules, part of this administrative and legal framework which is enabling and empowering you. It is not restricting or refraining you from something. It's giving you a new opportunity for the commercialization of your products more efficiently. And what has to be as a consequence of this is that we are not going to include in these DOPs I don't know, couple of dozen of new essential characteristics. This is not going to happen. We have a given number of them, and only the relevant ones should be taken on board. And this would then mean, of course, a given decision-making on which are the relevant ones, which ones we want to put there. And this decision-making is going to be very important in the coming, I would say, months, or at least in a year or two or something like this. And in these circumstances, we are collaborating very openly both with the industry and with other DGs interested in this matter. And this is now the process which is ongoing already and which will be intensified. So, we can go to the practical way forward. We will proceed with SEN and potentially EOTA 2 to practical implementation of this as sketched out. In this context, we will use the existing methods because we can use only something that exists. There is no point of trying to use something that doesn't exist. And then we will prepare for the potential of subsequent improvements in the content of this structure. And this is exactly what then allows for the second stage, the incorporation of those principles, those ideas which have been proven totally trustworthy and appropriate from, for example, the PEF context, but also from all the other contexts which are considered relevant at that stage, when these structured methods are going to be renewed. So, we are very open. CPR is an open structure. It is not something that is cemented. Maybe sometimes you get the feeling, but it is really not something that should be cemented now for the 20 or 30 years to come. This is not real life either. And then I have one of my favorite slides of the process as such, which already has started and then should continue. Many of you have seen it. Christoph laughs already. I have these nice words. Openness. I don't recall how many times I have mentioned this already, but we do believe in this. We do believe in transparency. We do believe in these processes to be done together and to be open and clear for everybody. We do believe in inclusion, so everybody to be invited and also allowed to join these processes. And we believe in commitment. So when people come in and participate in the debate, the results should be something which people can commit to. Because with these principles, for and by us all, we should be able to create the necessary confidence. Because as I have been saying several times, if the industry, if the sector does not have a confidence on the system they are applying, the things do not go. That is for sure. And so this is the measure, this is the measuring stock, the benchmark, what was also asked. We need a benchmark for the validity of our system, for what is better or smart regulation. and that is the confidence. The system has to be used, but because people are confident that it provides for good results, not because they have to. So I would more or less, yes, I would stop here and leave you with these contact details and also the possibility, of course, then to ask more questions from me and, of course, the others too later on. So I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.